Hey, it's Pat here from Smart Passive Income. This will be the last tip of a series of tips that I've been able to share with you here at Podpage. And again, thank you to Brendan here for allowing me to share this. And thank you to those of you who've already come over to what we do at SPI to educate people, not just podcasters, but business owners, many of them who have podcasts in their repertoire. And we'd love to see you there. But to finish up here, I want to talk about one of the bigger challenges that we podcasters have, and that is engagement with our audience. Because of the nature of our show and what we do, when you record an episode, it's very difficult to really get a person to start to get involved with it. They're listening more passively in their car while doing dishes or, at the gym or whatever it might be. So even just a mere getting them to click on something or go to a particular link is challenging. And of course, the more relevant the call to actions are to the episode they just listened to, the more enticing the lead magnet may or may not be. Or hopefully it's enticing, the more likely a person will go out of their way to participate. But I want to talk a little bit more about interactivity inside of your show. And there's different kinds of things that you can do to increase at least the involvement that your audience has so that they feel like they're more of a part of the show and more likely to engage in the future, or at least open the emails that you send after the fact or what have you. And the first thing I want to talk about is something that a lot of podcasters are using today, but if you're not, it's something worth considering, and that is to simultaneously cast or go live or broadcast your show while it's being recorded. And this is very difficult to do if you're doing a solo show, especially if you have a more produced show with a lot of edits. But if you're simply doing an interview show, you could consider, for example, having it be broadcasted live and then interacting with the audience that is there live with you. It could be as simple as going live on YouTube or live on Facebook or even on Instagram. And it doesn't have to be very professionally done, but the fact that people are getting behind the scenes of what it is that you do is good for a number of reasons. It makes them feel like they're a part of the process. It gives them an insider view, which feels very special. And of course, they're able to interact with you too. And if you have a special guest, you can take questions that you can hand over to them, or you can both tackle them. And make sure you're using people's names while live. It makes them feel really good. And those of the people who are listening later, even though they're not live, they will get a sense that it's live in a way that there are real people on the other end, just like them, who are catching it live. And you don't have to do this all the time, maybe even once a month or once a quarter to maybe celebrate particular episodes or to take advantage of a really special guest that you want to come on to allow your audience to ask questions to. These kinds of things can build a lot of hype and can bring some interactivity into your show. Now, the next thing that can work really well are things like polls and quizzes. Now, obviously not polling your listeners live to then share with them in that same episode what the results are, but polling, for example, your audience on Twitter or on Facebook and gathering that information, gathering that data, and then relaying it forward on that podcast. This is a very sort of indirect or asynchronous way to have your audience interact. They're providing some information, they're offering some feedback in a way. And maybe it's a series of questions, a survey that you offer, or maybe even just one question in their best story. And you can take those and then talk about them on the show. So there's a reason now for people to listen because you've almost seeded the fact that this is what the topic is going to be about. We're going to be very curious about what the results are, and you can talk about those and then sort of teach on top of that. And that data goes a really long way with supporting certain things that you might be educating your audience on. So polls, quizzes, those kinds of things. Number 3. You can actually invite your listeners in a more interactive way, more live, quote unquote live, not live like we just talked about, but say, for example, you ask them to contribute a question, but it's their voice. You're using a tool like SpeakPipe, which we talked about in the very first tip when we were interviewing forum and community owners so that they would promote those episodes in those forums and communities. But in this way, it's so that your audience that's listening to the podcast later here's somebody just like them going through a similar struggle or who has a similar question. And again, even though you're answering that one person's question, you're answering that on behalf of everybody else who's likely thinking about the same thing. So you can even use this opportunity as a way to sort of reward engagement elsewhere, right? Hey, if you reply to this post on Instagram, I'm going to select one of you and reach out to you to ask a question that I will feature live on the podcast. And you don't even have to capture their voice, which again, you can do using tools like SpeakPipe, but you could just simply read out their question. Again, make sure you answer the question, but include their name as well. So again, it creates that direct tie to your audience, and it just, again, adds a layer or a flavor to your show that's not normal that a person's going to listen to because those other hosts aren't thinking about it in this way. And then fourth and finally, in addition to getting your audience to become a part of the show. And actually, let me expand on that a little bit more. Instead of thinking of guests as they have to be A-listers and top industry leaders, invite some of your own audience, especially if you have customers or students. Invite them onto your podcast. They're going to do a wonderful job telling the story that is very similar to what an audience member might be going through. And truthfully, they're going to be a better endorser of what it is that you have to offer than you can be, because they are an actual student who's gone through that transformation, more relatable, in fact. So I offer up the mic and also host interviews with a lot of the members of the SPI community quite often, and that always does a good job of getting more members to come in because they're hearing somebody just like them. And fourth and finally, I'll make this one quick. You could gamify your podcast a little bit. You can run some scavenger hunts or run little challenges. Hey, everybody, if we get this episode to this many downloads, we're going to do something special. Or you might run some contests. One random listener, if you use the hashtag whatever on Instagram, I'll come find you, and then we'll have a 20-minute call. Again, just thinking of ways to get some more interactivity into your podcast because of the passive nature of how it's listened to and consumed can go really, really far in helping your audience not just listen to you, but also want to be more active in the community and also potentially become super fans as well. And I've written a book called Superfans that I highly recommend you check out if you haven't already. But more than that, I'm a super fan of Brendan Podpage here. Thank you so much, Brendan, for allowing me to share these tips. These last 4 tips hopefully have been helpful for those of you. And if you didn't catch those other tips, I'm sure Brendan's going to share a way for you to get access to those as well. But thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'd love to see you in the SPI community if you haven't explored and looked at that already. Come visit smartpassiveincome.com/community, or you can check out the links that Brendan has included down below as well. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.